Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier, and thank you for stopping by. I've been playing Samba Pati, a version, an iteration I never heard. This is by Santana, of course, and it really is a lovely lyrical short piece on the guitar. It's brilliant, and he's brilliant. And I still go back to music of his, and I never tire of it. I'll put up a photograph of him taken when he was a lot younger, I think in 1976. Home thoughts: if we wait for the moment when everything, absolutely everything is ready, we shall never begin. Ivan Turgenev. We sit in the mud, my friend, and reach for the stars. And then, oh youth, youth, you go your way heedless, uncaring, as if you owned all the treasures of the world. Even grief elates you, even sorrow sits well upon your brow. You are self-confident and insolent, and say, I alone am alive, behold, even while your own days fly past and vanish, without trace and without number, and everything within you melts away like wax in the sun, like snow. And perhaps the whole secret of your enchantment lies not indeed in your power to do whatever you may will, but in your power to think that there is nothing you will not do. It is this that you scatter to the winds, gifts which you could never have used to any other purpose. Each of us feels most deeply convinced that he has been too prodigal of his gifts, that he has a right to cry, oh, what could I not have done if only I had not wasted my time. I like this photograph of the main entrance and driveway to 1181 North Hillcrest Road, developed by Bruce Makowski at Trousdale Estates in Beverly Hills, California. Poroshenko confirmed that Ukraine forces are retreating or have retreated from Debaltseve, and Putin essentially put him in a put up or shut up moment, militarily speaking. BBC's Paul Adams tweeted Ukrainian armor withdrawing from Debaltseve. And then, interestingly, IHS Defense Risks tweeted Russia conducting major air exercises close to Europe. So it's become a very fluid and multi-layered situation, hasn't it? I don't think we've seen a scenario such as this for a very long time on Europe's doorstep as well. A citizen of the EU tweeted new Commersant video, mass surrender of Ukraine soldiers, and clearly it was. So we've seen Putin push extremely hard on the accelerator and push forward, and I think, I remember a remark he made a long time ago, right at the beginning of the crisis, when he said I can be in Kiev in 48 hours, and essentially he's making that point a little bit distant from Kiev, but making the point. US admits withholding some Iran talks information from Israel. This has been reported in the Times of Israel. Some sensitive details of its nuclear negotiations with Iran because it is worried that Israeli government officials have leaked information to try to scuttle the talks and will continue to do so. In extraordinary admissions that reflect increasingly strained ties between the US and Israel, the White House and State Department said they were not sharing everything from the negotiations with the Israelis and complained that Israeli officials had misrepresented what they had been told in the past. Comments came as a late March deadline to forge the outline of an Iran nuclear deal looms. Netanyahu has angered the White House by his open opposition to such a deal, and by the fact that accepting the Republican invitation to address Congress about Iran in early March. White House Press Secretary Josh Earnest says the United States is not going to be in a position of negotiating this agreement in public, particularly when we see that there is a continued practice of cherry-picking specific pieces of information, using them out of context to distort the negotiating position of the United States, Ernest said when asked whether the US was limiting the amount of information it shared with Israel about the talks. And what it tells me at this hyper-intensive reaction from Netanyahu is the deal might be very, very close. And that was confirmed by others who should know. UAE launches world's most luxurious airstrikes against IS targets. That was irresistible. And then during this awful beheading of Coptic Christians, Egyptian Coptic Christians in Libya, apparently at one point the masked leader turns to the Mediterranean and points a bloodied knife towards Europe, declaring, "We will conquer Rome, God willing." Libya Liberty tweeted, "You see a failed state, I see a brand opportunity." And have a look at the cartoon that was attached. This photograph caught my attention, a man taking a selfie by a crashing wave on Beirut's Corniche, a seaside promenade. Qatar recalled its ambassador to Egypt after his Egyptian counterpart in the Arab League accused the energy-rich Gulf Emirate of supporting terrorism, Al Jazeera reported. And, you know, those guys have been at loggerheads for a while, and Qatar fell bang in the middle of the schism around the Muslim Brotherhood. In its January policy statement, the Fed gave a nod to turmoil in markets across the globe, saying it would take financial and international developments into account. It was the first time since January 2013 that the Fed made an overt reference to overseas economic events in its policy statement. Repeated in January that it would be patient in deciding when to raise benchmark borrowing costs from zero, where they have been since late 2008, acknowledged a decline in certain inflation measures. Fed Chair Yellen said that being patient implied the Fed would not raise rates at least for the next two meetings. Minutes from the January policy meeting show that many of its participants feared that dropping patient whenever the time comes risks shifting market expectations of a rate hike to an unduly narrow range of dates. So I think it was more dovish than I had expected, but the Fed is also hostage to the data, and I expect the data to strengthen. Euro is popped up but trading around 114.40, which is near the top of the trading range. Dollar index 93.97. Japanese yen 118.71, Swissy 0.9412, pound 154.60. Aussie 0.702, India rupee 62.083, South Korean 111.0861, Rial 283.80, Egyptian pound 762.90, and the rand 1161.03. Dollar index, about which I'm bullish, but I think we've got to keep an eye on how trading plays out over the next few sessions. Euro dollar is trapped in this range of 114.72, 112.79, where it's been for a while. It's testing the top of the range right now. I don't think it's going to make it through that. Nestle is to be the first major US confectioner to remove artificial colors and flavoring from its chocolate. That will prove a popular move, I'm sure. Gold, last trading at 12.16.12, got below 1200 yesterday. And the rally, in my view, is so over. Crude oil had a fearful session yesterday. Last time I looked, I put up a 5-day chart. It was below $51. The bounce was a head fake. Storage is full. There's nowhere for all this oil to go. It's going lower. S&P predicts a price drop of 10% to 20% this year in Dubai. What was interesting is that Indians are the biggest foreign buyers of Dubai homes and spent about $4.9 billion in both 2013 and 2014. British buyers distant second. And Dubai is, as I said, in February 2014, the real transit state, a connection point in an interconnected picture, and I'll put up a photograph taken this year as we left to return to Nairobi. Joy Doreen Bira tweeted via the Washington Post, "Our efforts to limit presidential power in Africa working. Good luck, Jonathan will wait 6 additional weeks." This is the article now in the Washington Post, before he faces voters at the polls in his re-election campaign. The Electoral Commission declared that the presidential and legislative elections originally scheduled for Feb 14 will be postponed until March, so the military can launch an operation to secure the northeast from Boko Haram and allow voters in the region to participate in the polling. Saying, this is not the first attempt by Jonathan to change the rules of the game to lengthen his time in power. Nigeria's constitution limits presidents to 2 4-year terms. Because Jonathan ascended to the presidency in 2010 upon the death of the incumbent Umari Yar'Adua, you remember, I think he was in a coma and kept alive for a few weeks as everyone tried to work out what to do next. This was a tactic attempted by Olusegun Obasanjo, although it was ultimately defeated in the legislature. Saying Nigeria is not the only country where limits to staying in power are being tested. In the DRC, which I've spoken about already, President Kabila was faced down by the street, with 42 people dying. Of course, Blaise Compaoré, which kicked all of this off, basically was ousted by a popular insurrection, saying in this article that term limits are focal points for political change because they challenge the legitimacy of the incumbent's right to remain in power. In sub-Saharan Africa, 34 constitutions have been implemented since the 1990s that have term limits in place. Of these, 20% have had full compliance. Really interesting article. And very right about the fact that the moment when there is an attempted extension is the moment of maximum political pressure. Talking about Museveni. I wrote about this in November when I was writing about Ouagadougou's signal to sub-Saharan Africa. And I was saying then, talking about President Compaoré, saying there are plenty of other African presidents who seeking to pull off the same magic trick, and events in Ouagadougou have surely put them on notice, I said. We need to ask ourselves, how many people can an incumbent shoot stone cold dead in such a situation? 100, 1,000, 10,000? This is another point. There is a threshold beyond which the incumbent can't go. Where that threshold lies will be discovered in the throes of the event. And therefore, the preeminent point to note is that protests in Burkina Faso achieved escape velocity. Overthrowing incumbents is all about acceleration. Out of a population of 70 million people in Burkina Faso, over 60% are aged between 17 and 24. The country's youth flex their muscles. What's clear is that a very young, very informed, and very connected African youth demographic, which a lot of people characterize as a demographic dividend, but for beautiful Blaise Compaoré turned into a demographic terminator, is set to alter the existing equilibrium between the rulers and the subjects. A rebalancing has begun. They've got some interesting data about African Eurobonds. What's interesting is Nigeria. Nigeria is now trading about 525 over. Ethiopia 475 over. Kenya 410 over. So it gives you a feel. Kenya 410, Nigeria 530. Katrina's written an interesting piece about Uganda, where a Russian group subject to sanctions has won, Rostec is the name of the company, has won the contract to build a $2.5 billion refinery plus a product pipeline and associated infrastructure. Sergei Chemezov, Rostec's CEO, is a former KGB officer and close ally of President Putin. Has been subject to US sanctions blocking his assets and prohibiting US companies from dealing with him since April 2014. Uganda is under no legal compulsion to comply with the sanctions. The decision will further threaten its international standing, of course. Saying that Museveni has struck up a personal friendship with Mr. Putin. Both share an appreciation of strongman diplomacy directed against the West. Decision to do business with a Russian military contractor whose chief executive is subject to sanctions sounds typical Museveni, said one senior Western diplomat. The West won't dictate to us who we do business with, even if the CEO of Rostec is under US sanctions. We have very cordial diplomatic relations with Russia. They supply us with military equipment. They train our officers. We're not going to allow anybody to choose for us, our friends. If you haven't seen President Museveni at Mindspeak, do have a look at the link, and then you'll better understand the man. Billionaire Ibrahim defies African basket case cliches. He says there is a tendency to make general judgments. Africa is a basket case, Africa is rising. What people need to do is to spend a little time looking at the granularity of what's happening in Africa. South African all-share up 5.65% year to date, but has corrected 459 points off a record high reached just as on the 16th of February. Dollar rand 11.61. Interesting piece in Global Research about Putin and the Mideast's middleman Sisi. Sisi is playing a very strategic game in balancing his relations between Washington and Moscow, with the aim that closer ties with the latter will lead to a better arrangement with the former. The world is arguably in the throes of a new Cold War. Just this time, instead of being between capitalism and communism, it's being played out between unipolarity and multipolarity. The US used to hold the cards in Cairo under Mubarak, but after betraying their old and aging ally, in the interests of guiding an inevitable leadership transition, they ended up on the wrong side of history when their Muslim Brotherhood proxy was overthrown by al-Sisi. Put up a photograph of Sisi entertaining Vladimir Putin. Egyptian stock market up 6.88% year to date. Nigeria all share has bounced 5.771% since the 13th of February, but remains down 15.81%. Nigeria fixes the Naira at 198 in a de facto devaluation, scrapped its bi-weekly currency auctions on Wednesday, and a market body said it would sell dollars only at 198 Naira, a move that amounts to de facto devaluation of the currency. Under new trading rules, banks will only be able to purchase foreign exchange if they have a prior order from a corporate customer, such as a fuel importer or foreign mobile phone company looking to repatriate profits or dividends. 19th of November, I said the currency heads to 200. The central bank does not have the firepower. We learned on one day alone last Friday they spent $401 million trying to defend it. That speaks to my point about not having the firepower. January 21, I said the currency is headed to 220, forwards are at 275. And Emefiele's finger in the dike strategy is about to be overwhelmed by a tsunami. That tsunami is with us now. Boko Haram threatens to disrupt Nigeria. Allah will not leave you to proceed with these elections even after us, because you're saying that authority is from people to people, which means that people should rule each other. But Allah says that authority is only to Him. Only His rule is the one which applies on this land. And finally, we say that these elections that you are planning to do will not happen in peace, even if that costs us our lives. The video message, titled A Message to the Leaders of the Disbelievers. Ghana Central Bank held its benchmark rate at 21%. The Ghana Stock Exchange Composite Index is down 4.73% year to date. Photos from one Gabo demonstration to demand accountability and good governance in Ghana. Lots of demonstrations happening there. Changbarai says Mugabe's birthday is an obscene jamboree and should be cancelled. Eni is saying that the sale of a 10% stake in the Mozambique gas field is still on the agenda. They'd previously offloaded 20% of a controlling stake in the Mozambique field to China's CNPC for around $4 billion. Put up a photograph of Maputo from the sea. Fortune magazine is talking about why Africa may be on the verge of an internet boom. And it's a very interesting article, particularly about e-commerce. And absolutely right. Pygmy attacks on Bantu rivals in DR Congo leave 27 dead. If you haven't seen that snippet from the interview I did with Charles about the fuel price stimulus, then please have a look at it, because it really is very finely, it's granular. You get a good feel of what's going to happen. I think the oil price drop is going to be a massive stimulus in the grassroots. The economy outperforms when the average Joe, who's not earning very much, has more in his pocket. EABL has soared 11.688% year to date, which is a very strong rally. We've done a little clip of when Charles is speaking about Senator Beer, and there's the whole story behind that, and also about geographic expansion and premiumization. Nation FM tweeted, Kenya ferry daily passenger numbers at Likoni Channel set to hit 500,000. And I've sat on that ferry many times, deep in the milieu of the overwhelming tide of humanity. I described it not too long ago. Now it's 500,000 people a day. I'll put up a photograph of the Likoni ferry taken 371 days ago. Kenya shilling 91.397. Nairobi All Share up 6.92%, has closed at a record for 8 consecutive sessions. NSE 20 up 6.52%. Crown Paints followed a litany of companies issuing profits warning. Pan Africa yesterday, now Crown Paints. The drop in full-year earnings is as a result of very challenging market dynamics for subsidiaries in our expansion program within the region. Naira All Share stormed 0.734% higher yesterday to close at a record for the 8th consecutive session. That's a red-hot winning streak of the legendary kind, like Sir Stephen Runciman, feet in Las Vegas, whom I met. It's a very interesting chap. He had this mansion, and I was in Durham at the time. Nairobi All Shares plus an eye popping 6.924%. NSE 20 is within 0.5% of a more than 5-year high. Kakuzi set a record for the 3rd consecutive session, and it's going to set one today as well. It's up 75% since the beginning of the year. Safaricom firmed 0.67% to close at 14.95, and I said yesterday it's going to slice through 15 tomorrow, i.e. today, like a hot knife through butter, and set a fresh record closing high. It's going to do that. Serena has fallen a total of 6.08% over 2 sessions since reporting their full-year profits warning, but I think that's about it. Pan Africa released a full-year profits warning after the market closed, citing unrealized mark-to-market gains on equity investments, which they got in 2013, not repeating in 2014, and much lower profits from property sales. Kenya Power, whose results we'll talk about, they accelerated turnover 19.1968%, profit before tax up 52.9355%. Strong results any way you care to look at them. It's now rallied 24.22% year to date. EABL, as I said previously, that surged 11.688% year to date, and still seems pointed higher to me. I've got a 400 price target this year. We might achieve that a lot more quickly than previously thought.